right, guys, one more soup for you, a squash curry. So you can use butternut squash or pumpkin squash. Today I'm using butternut squash. Chop up one whole butternut squash, and I'm going to show you some tips that I use to cut squash. Use a long blade to cut it into pieces, because that means you can use both hands. And then when you get the pieces that are round, flip it on its flat side so it won't move on you. Again, using a longer blade, you can put both hands down and cut it into pieces. Then I like to use the shorter, heavier blade, the chef's blade, to cut the skin off and then chop it into cubes. So you're going to cube one whole butternut squash and set that aside. That'll be the main ingredient for this squash curry. Then you're going to put some red peppers, slice those up. Also going to chop up some broccoli and set that aside as well. Now, this recipe in my cookbook calls for shallots, but I didn't have any, so I'm just going to use onions. Same family, it's just not quite as sweet. But so you're going to chop up some onions, ginger, and garlic, as usual with most of my soups. You start off with sauteing that, and then you're going to put in some red curry paste, 3 tablespoons of red curry paste. Get that all mingled in there. Add a little bit of extra water if you need it, and get that all mixed together real good. And then you're going to add the coconut milk. It's 2 cans of coconut milk. I use the coconut milk light, so it takes some of the fat content down. Otherwise, it's going to be very high in fat, this soup. And then there's 2 tablespoons of brown sugar that's called for in this recipe. The more and more I do this recipe, you don't really need the sugar. It doesn't make it more sweet, yes, but I mean, it's really not necessary. So get that all ready to go. And that's going to be your base for where you're going to cook the sweet potatoes. I'm sorry, the sweet potatoes. You're going to cook the butternut squash in. So that's going to be your basic soup that you're going to cook everything in. So put the peppers in there, the squash in there, and now you're going to simmer this all for about 20 minutes so you get the squash nice and soft and ready to go. And then the same thing here, you're going to take about 3/4 of the soup out, and you are going to blend it in a blender, and then you're going to reconstitute it back into the soup. So I usually leave about 1/4 of the pieces of squash in the soup, so I do have some big pieces of squash in the soup when I eat it. And you're going to put that all back together, and then you're going to put the broccoli in it, and you're just going to put the cover on, let that sit for about 10-15 minutes, and that will soften up the broccoli just enough to be ready to go to eat. And that is it for this squash curry. It tastes really great, and you can eat it as a standalone soup. It's very thick and very creamy because of the coconut milk. Very thick and creamy. You can just have as a standalone soup, or what we do is we like to put it over rice like a standard curry. So there you go. Get my cookbook, RoutineHealthAndFitness.com.